Revenge with Marvella. I stood at the boardroom table, pointing at the merger documents with a trembling finger. Not from age, but from anger. There's a $12 million deficit buried in Section 7, I said clearly. If we sign this, the company collapses in 6 months. My brother Marcus laughed loud enough for everyone to hear. He turned to the 3 investors sitting across from us and waved his hand dismissively. Gentlemen, I apologize. My sister gets confused by big numbers. She's 72 and hasn't worked a real deal in decades. The investors chuckled politely. Marcus pressed the intercom button on the conference phone. Security, please come to boardroom C. We need to escort an elderly lady out. She's wandered into the wrong meeting. My face burned with humiliation as 2 security guards appeared at the door. Marcus smiled at me with false sympathy. Go home, Catherine. Rest. Let the men handle business. I gathered my papers silently and walked out with my head high. But inside, I was already planning his destruction. He'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. The next morning, I arrived at my office at 7 o'clock sharp, just like I had for 43 years. My key card wouldn't work at the main entrance. I tried it 3 times before the security guard, young Tommy, who usually greeted me warmly, approached with an uncomfortable expression. Miss Catherine, I'm sorry. Your access was revoked last night. He pointed to the sidewalk where a cardboard box sat next to the bike rack. My personal items were stacked inside framed photos, my military commendation plaque, even my coffee mug. Marcus appeared in the glass doorway, arms crossed, looking satisfied with himself. He pushed the door open slightly. Your security clearance is gone, Catherine. I'm majority shareholder now, remember? You can go knit a sweater or take up gardening. Stay out of men's business from now on. He let the door close. I stood there for a moment, letting people walk past me, letting them see the old woman whose own brother had thrown her out. Then I picked up my box and walked to my car. Marcus didn't know I'd been waiting for him to make this exact move. I drove straight home, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. My house was a small craftsman-style place on Maple Street, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I rushed inside and headed straight for my home office. The door was hanging open. My stomach dropped. File cabinets were pulled open, papers scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. My desk drawers had been yanked out and emptied. The small safe where I kept the original company charters, the documents proving my mother had left me 51% ownership, not Marcus, stood open and empty. Marcus had been here. He'd used the spare key I'd foolishly given him years ago when he'd claimed he wanted to check on me if I didn't answer my phone. I sank into my desk chair and laughed bitterly. He thought he'd erased my proof of ownership. He thought those were the only copies that mattered. Marcus had always underestimated me, ever since we were children. He was about to learn that was a fatal mistake. I stood up and headed for the basement stairs. Marcus thought my basement was just a laundry room. He'd made jokes about it for years, calling it my granny dungeon, where I probably did quilting or canning. He'd never actually come down here, of course. Too beneath him. I walked past the washing machine and dryer to the back wall, which was lined with old metal shelving units holding boxes of Christmas decorations and old kitchen appliances. I reached behind a box labeled China Fragile and pressed a small button hidden in the concrete. A section of the wall, shelves and all, swung inward silently on pneumatic hinges. Behind it was a room about 10 feet square, lined with server racks, monitors, and equipment that definitely didn't belong in an elderly woman's basement. This was left over from my years as a lead cryptographer for the Department of Defense, back when I was building encryption systems that didn't officially exist. I'd kept it maintained, kept it hidden, kept it ready. Just in case. I sat down at the main terminal and logged in. My fingers flew across the keyboard, muscle memory taking over. Within minutes, I was inside the company's secure network. Marcus had changed the passwords, but he'd used the system I designed 30 years ago. I knew every backdoor, every hidden access point, every vulnerability. I was inside in under 3 minutes. What I found made my blood run cold. Marcus hadn't just stolen my shares through legal manipulation. He'd been doing something far worse. For the past 8 months, he'd been using my digital signature, My actual cryptographic signature that I'd set up for authorizing sensitive company transactions to approve export contracts. But these weren't normal exports. I scrolled through the manifests, my stomach turning. Advanced encryption chips. Military-grade communication hardware. Satellite positioning systems. All going to a country currently on the State Department's blacklist for arms trafficking. Marcus was selling restricted technology to enemies of the United States, and he was doing it under my name. If the Department of Defense discovered this, I wouldn't just lose the company. I'd go to federal prison for treason. He wasn't just stealing my business. He was making me his fall girl, setting me up to take the blame for his crimes while he disappeared with millions of dollars. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. Marcus thought I was just a confused old woman. He was about to discover I was something much more dangerous. The secure phone on the wall, a landline that ran through military-grade encryption, rang exactly once. I stared at it for a long moment. Only 3 people in the world had this number, and 2 of them were dead. I picked up the receiver. "Agent Miller," a familiar voice said. It was Colonel Benjamin Vance, my commanding officer from my Defense Department days. I hadn't heard his voice in 12 years, not since my retirement ceremony. "It's been a long time, Colonel," I said carefully. "Not long enough, apparently." "Catherine, why is your brother selling our encryption keys to a blacklist country?" His voice was steel. "I've been watching the export flags for the past 72 hours. Your signature is on every single shipment authorization. Either you've gone rogue or something else is happening here." I closed my eyes. "Something else is happening, sir. Marcus has been forging my digital signature. He's setting me up to take the fall while he runs with the money." There was a long pause. "I can have him arrested in 3 hours," the colonel said. "Federal agents, full tactical team, the works. Say the word." I thought about Marcus laughing at me in the boardroom. I thought about him throwing my belongings on the sidewalk. I smiled. "No, sir. I want to do this my way first." "Your way?" The colonel's voice carried a hint of amusement. "Agent Miller, this is a national security issue. We don't have time for personal vendettas." I leaned back in my chair, eyes fixed on the monitors showing Marcus's illegal transactions. "Give me 2 weeks, Colonel. I want him to lose everything first, the money, the reputation, the company, and that smug smile. Then he can rot in a federal cell knowing that his confused old sister destroyed him." The colonel was quiet for a moment. I could almost hear him thinking, weighing regulations against results. "You built half the systems we still use, Catherine. You've earned some trust. 2 weeks. But if he tries to move more technology or attempts to flee the country, I'm pulling the plug on your operation immediately." "Understood." "Understood, sir. You won't regret this." "I'd better not." "And Catherine? Make it hurt." He hung up. I turned back to my monitors and began pulling up every file, every transaction, every email Marcus had sent in the past year. He'd been sloppy, overconfident. He'd left a trail wide enough to drive a tank through. I had 2 weeks to dismantle my brother's life, piece by piece. Time to get started. 3 days later, Marcus held a charity gala at the downtown Riverside Hotel. The invitation I'd intercepted from his email said it was to celebrate his bold new vision for the company as sole leader. Translation: celebrating stealing everything from his elderly sister. I showed up anyway, wearing my most grandmother-like outfit, a lavender cardigan, pearl necklace, and comfortable shoes. I'd even used my cane, the one I only needed on cold days. Marcus spotted me from across the ballroom and his face darkened, but he couldn't make a scene. Not in front of 200 wealthy investors and city officials. "Catherine," he said through clenched teeth when I approached. "What are you doing here?" "Supporting my baby brother, of course," I said sweetly, loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "I'm so proud of everything you're accomplishing." His smile was plastic. "How kind. Please enjoy the refreshments." While he gave his speech on stage, I moved slowly through the ballroom, playing the part of a harmless old woman. I stopped at each of the main tables near the stage, adjusting my purse, dropping my program, making small talk with guests. What they didn't notice was the tiny signal jamming device I attached under each table, no bigger than a quarter. By the time Marcus finished his speech, I'd planted 6 of them. Everything was ready. Marcus was 40 minutes into his presentation about the company's exciting new direction when I triggered the devices from my phone. Every cell phone in the ballroom suddenly received the same anonymous text message at exactly the same moment. The room filled with notification sounds, pings, chimes, buzzes. Marcus paused mid-sentence, confused by the sudden distraction. People pulled out their phones. I watched their faces change from curious to shocked to disgusted. The text contained a recording I'd pulled from Marcus's office last week, a conversation between him and his business partner. Marcus's voice came through clearly on every phone. The old woman handed me everything on a silver platter. She actually thought Mother left her majority control. I've been forging ownership documents for 2 years. It's almost too easy to rob her of her life's work. She's too senile to even notice. Laughter on the recording. Then his partner's voice. What if she figures it out? Marcus again. Who's going to believe a confused old woman over me? The ballroom had gone completely silent except for the recording playing on 200 phones. Every eye turned toward the stage. Marcus's face had gone white as paper. He looked out at the crowd, then at me. I smiled and gave him a little wave with my fingers. Then I turned and walked slowly out of the ballroom, my cane tapping on the marble floor. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in my basement workshop, monitoring the fallout. By 3 a.m, the story had hit social media. By 6, the local news picked it up. By the time the stock market opened at 9:30, the company's value had dropped 18%. My phone rang at 10. Marcus's number. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Hello. I made my voice sound sleepy and confused. You destroyed me. Marcus screamed so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. The investors are pulling out. The board wants an emergency meeting. The stock is in free fall. What did you do? Marcus, sweetheart, is this about your blood pressure again? You sound very upset. Have you been taking your medications? You know stress isn't good for men your age. Stop it. Stop acting like you don't know what you did. That recording, that text message, that was you. Recording? Text message? Marcus, I don't even know how to send those text things. Are you feeling all right? Maybe you should sit down and have some water. I could hear him breathing hard, trying to control his rage. This isn't over, Catherine. You're going to pay for this. I'm sure I don't know what you mean. Now, I need to go take my morning pills. Try to have a calm day, dear. I hung up and allowed myself a real smile. The game was just beginning. That night, I watched through the hidden cameras I'd installed in Marcus's office 6 months ago. He didn't know they existed. They were built into the smoke detectors, completely invisible. At 11:45, Marcus unlocked the office with his key card. He'd sent everyone home hours ago. He looked paranoid, jumping at shadows. He went straight to the locked cabinet behind his desk and pulled out 3 thick folders, the export manifests, the ones that had my forged signature on every page. He fed them into the industrial shredder beside the filing cabinet, watching each page get cut into tiny strips. What Marcus didn't know was that I'd replaced his regular shredder with a special model 3 weeks ago, right after I'd first discovered his scheme. This shredder looked identical to the old one, same brand, same model number. But this one had a high-resolution scanner built into the feed mechanism. Every page that went into the shredder was photographed, digitized, and transmitted to my basement server before the blades even touched it. I had perfect copies of every document he thought he was destroying. On my monitor, I watched him finish shredding. He looked relieved, almost happy. He actually smiled. I shook my head. Amateur, I whispered to my empty basement. Marcus had no idea how deep his hole was getting. The next morning, I used one of my shell companies, a business I'd set up 20 years ago for exactly this kind of situation, and made Marcus an offer. The company name was Titan Holdings, registered in Delaware, owned by a complex web of trusts that couldn't be traced back to me without months of investigation. I had the Colonel's people add their resources to make it look completely legitimate. The offer was simple. Titan Holdings would buy out Marcus's position in the company for $40 million, assuming all debts and legal liabilities. Given that the company's stock was still falling and 3 major investors had already pulled their money, it was actually a generous offer. Marcus's lawyer called me at my home number, not knowing I was connected to the offer, to ask if I'd be willing to sell my shares too. Oh, I don't really understand all those business things, I told him sweetly. You'd have to talk to my financial advisor. I'm just an old woman trying to get by. The lawyer thanked me and hung up. 2 days later, I received word that Marcus was going to sign. He was desperate. The bailout meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon at the lawyer's office. I had everything prepared. This was going to be beautiful. Friday arrived cold and gray. I parked across the street from the lawyer's office and watched through binoculars as Marcus arrived in his expensive car. He looked terrible, wrinkled suit, dark circles under his eyes, hair messy. The stress was eating him alive. Perfect. I'd arranged for the signing to happen in Conference Room B, the one with windows facing the street. Through my binoculars, I watched Marcus sit down at the table. The lawyer slid the contract across to him, 70 pages of legal text that Marcus barely glanced at. He was too desperate, too eager to escape the sinking ship. He signed the first page, the second, the third. Then he paused. Even from across the street, I saw his body go rigid. He picked up one of the pages and held it close to his face, examining something. Then he stood up so fast his chair fell over backward. Through the window, I saw him shouting at the lawyer, pointing at the paper. What Marcus had finally noticed was a tiny watermark in the corner of each page. It was small enough that most people would never see it, just a faint image about the size of a postage stamp. But Marcus had seen it. The watermark was the insignia of the 304th Intelligence Unit, my old military division. Marcus knew that symbol. I'd had it on my retirement plaque, the one he'd thrown in a box on the sidewalk. He'd finally realized who the mysterious investor really was. 30 minutes later, Marcus's car screeched into my driveway so fast he left tire marks on the concrete. I was sitting in my living room with a cup of tea waiting. I'd unlocked the front door so he could storm right in, which he did. You. He pointed at me with a shaking hand. This whole thing, Titan Holdings, the bailout, it's you. I took a sip of my tea. I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about, Marcus. Would you like some tea? You seem agitated. Don't play games with me. I saw the watermark. You're trying to steal the company back. He was pacing now, his face red with rage. You know what? I'm done with this. I'm calling social services. I'm having you declared incompetent. I'll put you in a state asylum where you belong, and then I'll contest mothers will properly. You're mentally unfit, and I can prove it. I just smiled and glanced at the clock on the mantel. 11:58. 2 more minutes. Marcus, you should really calm down. Your blood pressure. Stop talking about my blood pressure. He was screaming now, spittle flying from his mouth. You're a crazy old woman who's about to lose everything. The clock struck noon. Right on time, I heard the sound of heavy vehicles pulling into my driveway. Multiple vehicles. Marcus heard it too. He looked out the window and froze. 3 military vehicles had parked in my driveway and on the street in front of my house. 2 were standard transport trucks with canvas covers. The third was a black command vehicle with government plates. Soldiers in formal dress uniforms climbed out, followed by several people in suits who were clearly federal agents. Marcus started laughing, a high-pitched, slightly hysterical sound. You called the military on me? You called the army because I won't give you the company. He was almost giggling now. This is perfect. They're going to see how crazy you are. They're going to take you away, not me. The doorbell rang. I stood up slowly, using my cane. Marcus, I think you should be quiet now. Why? So they don't see how senile you've become? I'm going to tell them everything. I'm going to show them that you're mentally unfit and dangerous. I opened the door. Colonel Vance stood there in his dress uniform, chest covered in medals and ribbons. Behind him were 6 military police officers and 4 federal agents. The colonel's eyes moved past me to Marcus. Mr. Marcus Brennan? Finally. Marcus pushed past me toward the colonel. Sir, I'm so glad you're here. This woman, my sister, she's not mentally well. She's been harassing me, interfering with my business, making false accusations. She needs professional help, and I think you can see the colonel held up one hand. Marcus stopped talking. Marcus straightened his jacket and put on what he probably thought was a reasonable, concerned expression. Sir, with all due respect, this is a civil family matter. She's just an elderly woman who doesn't know where she is half the time. She gets confused, makes up stories, and Colonel Vance stepped forward, right into Marcus's personal space. The colonel was 6 feet 3 inches tall and built like he'd spent his entire life in the military. Marcus actually took a step backward. When the colonel spoke, his voice was quiet but hard as steel. She is a retired senior intelligence officer with 30 years of service to the Department of Defense. She holds security clearances you don't have the background to even hear about. And you, Mr. Brennan, are currently in possession of stolen state property and classified military technology. Marcus's confident expression crumbled. What? No, I don't. I'm a businessman. I don't have any military. You've been selling encrypted communication systems to blacklist countries for 8 months. Every system contains classified code that belongs to the United States government. You forged your sister's signature to authorize the exports. The colonel pulled out a tablet and held it up. On the screen were the scanned manifests from the shredder, perfect copies of every document Marcus thought he'd destroyed. We have everything, Mr. Brennan. Every shipment. Every transaction. Every email. Marcus's face went from red to white in an instant. He looked at me, then back at the colonel, then at the documents on the tablet. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. How did you? I destroyed those papers. I shredded them myself. The colonel smiled, and it wasn't a friendly smile. Your sister designed most of our intelligence gathering systems, Mr. Brennan. Did you really think a paper shredder would stop her? One of the federal agents, a woman in a dark suit, stepped forward. Mr. Brennan, I'm Special Agent Torres, FBI. We've been monitoring your office for 6 months. Marcus stared at her. 6 months? That's impossible. I would have known. Your administrative assistant, Amanda Price, has been working with us since March. Every file you gave her to copy, every meeting she scheduled, every password she saw you enter into your computer, she reported all of it. I watched the realization dawn on Marcus's face. His loyal assistant, the young woman he'd hired straight out of business school, the one he'd trusted completely. She'd been a federal plant the entire time. This is entrapment. Marcus shouted. You can't do this. We have enough evidence to convict you without anything from the past 6 months, Agent Torres said calmly. The past 6 months just made our case airtight. The colonel nodded to the military police. Mr. Brennan, you're under arrest for violations of the Arms Export Control Act, fraud, forgery, and treason. As the military police put handcuffs on Marcus, his business partner, Kenneth Price, was across town making his own desperate move. I watched it happen through the security cameras at the company headquarters. Kenneth ran into the building's server room with a gasoline can and a lighter. He was going to burn the evidence, destroy the digital records that could convict him along with Marcus. What Kenneth didn't know was that I'd upgraded the server room's fire suppression system 2 years ago. The old system used water sprinklers. The new system used halon gas, a chemical that removes oxygen from the air, suffocating fires instantly. I was in my basement workshop, watching Kenneth on my monitor. I saw him splash gasoline across the server racks. I saw him pull out his lighter. The moment I saw the spark, I pressed a button on my keyboard. Alarms blared in the server room. Kenneth looked up confused. Then the halon system activated. White gas flooded the room in seconds, so thick Kenneth disappeared from view. The fire went out before it even started. The halon would keep Kenneth alive, but unconscious until help arrived. I'd already called the police. They arrived 7 minutes later and found Kenneth passed out on the floor, the lighter still in his hand. Another one down. Back at my house, Marcus was still trying to process what was happening. The military police had walked him to one of the transport vehicles, but the colonel had ordered them to wait before leaving. Marcus was sitting in the back of the truck, handcuffed, when the colonel approached with another tablet. Mr. Brennan, I thought you might want to see this. He held up the screen. It showed bank account information, Marcus's accounts, all of them. The personal checking account. The offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The secret account in Switzerland. Every single one showed the same thing. Balance, $0. Marcus's eyes went huge. What did you do? That's my money. You can't just steal. I didn't steal anything, the colonel said. Your sister simply redirected your funds to their rightful destination. I stepped up beside the colonel, no longer using my cane. I held up my own laptop so Marcus could see the screen. Every dollar you took from the company, every illegal payment you received, every bribe, I tracked all of it. The money is currently in the Veterans Housing Trust, funding homes for soldiers who actually serve their country. Marcus looked like he might vomit. That was $43 million. $43,600,000 and change, I corrected. I was very thorough. You can't do this. That's theft. Sue me, I said simply. From prison. With no money for lawyers. The evening news started at 6 o'clock. I sat in my living room with a fresh cup of tea and watched the story unfold on every channel. Breaking news tonight, tech mogul Marcus Brennan has been arrested on federal charges including arms trafficking, fraud, and treason. The anchor's face was serious. In a stunning development, authorities say Brennan attempted to frame his own sister, a retired military intelligence officer, for his crimes. They showed footage of Marcus being led to the military vehicle in handcuffs. He looked broken, defeated, nothing like the confident man who'd laughed at me in the boardroom 2 weeks ago. The story continued. Catherine Miller, 72, served for 30 years as a senior cryptographer for the Department of Defense. Sources say she uncovered her brother's illegal activities and worked with federal authorities to build a case against him. They showed my photo from my retirement ceremony, me in my dress uniform, standing next to the colonel, both of us saluting. I looked strong and proud. The anchor concluded, Brennan's business partner was also arrested today after allegedly attempting to destroy evidence. Both men face up to 40 years in federal prison. By the time the sun set, Marcus's name was completely destroyed. His social media accounts were flooded with angry comments. His business contacts were publicly distancing themselves. He was ruined. The next morning, I met with Marcus's lawyer, his former lawyer, technically, since Marcus could no longer afford to pay him. We met in the lawyer's office downtown. I arrived early and made sure to bring my cane, though I didn't really need it anymore. The lawyer, a nervous man named Arnold Fisher, slid a folder across his desk toward me. Ms. Miller, I've been instructed to give this to you. It was in your mother's actual safety deposit box, held at the bank. I opened the folder. Inside was the real will, the one Marcus had never seen. My mother's handwriting was shaky but clear. To my daughter Catherine, I leave full ownership and control of Miller Technologies, provided she continues to demonstrate sound judgment and moral character. To my son Marcus, I leave ownership only if Catherine is deceased or has shown clear moral turpitude in her business dealings. Below that, in a separate note, Catherine, if you're reading this, it means Marcus has tried to take what isn't his. I'm sorry. I saw the darkness in him years ago. The copy I left in the house safe was fake, a test. He failed. Everything is yours. Protect it. I felt tears burning in my eyes. My mother knew. The lawyer nodded. She set up this arrangement through the bank 23 years ago. Marcus never had legitimate claim to majority control. The documents he was using were the fakes your mother created. 2 days later, I called an emergency meeting of the board of directors. Marcus had packed the board with his friends and yes men over the past 3 years, pushing out anyone who questioned his decisions. They all showed up looking nervous, probably expecting me to be angry. They were right. The meeting was held in the main conference room and was live-streamed to every employee in the company. I wanted everyone to see this. I stood at the head of the table. My mother's will displayed on the screen behind me. Gentlemen, as of today, I am exercising my rights as sole owner of Miller Technologies. Effective immediately, the following members of the board are terminated. I read through the list. 8 names. Every single person Marcus had appointed. Their faces went from nervous to shocked to angry, but none of them argued. They knew the company was in chaos and fighting would only make things worse for their reputations. Your termination packages will be minimal, as outlined in your contracts. You have 1 hour to clear your personal belongings from your offices. I pressed a button and new names appeared on the screen. These are your replacements. The list included the 3 senior engineers Marcus had forced into early retirement because they were too old to understand modern business. It included 2 women Marcus had denied promotions because they were too emotional for leadership. And it included 5 department heads Marcus had mocked for being too principled to make hard decisions. Every person he'd cast aside. They were all coming back. A week later, I was working in my office, my real office, the corner one with windows overlooking the city, when my assistant buzzed me. Ms. Miller, you have a phone call. The caller says it's urgent. I glanced at the caller ID. It was from the county jail. Marcus. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. Hello. Marcus's voice was small, broken. Nothing like the commanding tone he'd used in the boardroom. Catherine. It's me. Hello, Marcus. How are you? There was a long pause. Then, quietly, I need help. They're saying I could get 30 years. I need a lawyer, a good lawyer, and I don't have any money left. I thought maybe you could. Could what, Marcus? Could help me. Could loan me money for a lawyer. Could let me stay at the house when I make bail. I'm your brother. Please. I leaned back in my chair and looked out at the city. Marcus, I'm just an elderly woman who doesn't understand big numbers, remember? I'm confused by business matters. I'm senile and not mentally fit. At least, that's what you told everyone. Catherine, please, you know what elderly women do, Marcus? We live in quiet houses. We knit sweaters. We stay out of men's business. I wouldn't want to confuse you with my lifestyle or my decisions. I could hear him crying now. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. So am I, Marcus. Goodbye. I hung up and blocked his number. Over the next 2 months, I worked 16-hour days cleaning up Marcus's mess. The company books were a disaster of hidden debts, fake contracts, and illegal payments. I brought in an outside audit team and gave them complete access to everything. We found more problems than I'd expected. Marcus had been skimming money for 5 years, not 2. He'd set up 7 shell companies to hide funds. He'd borrowed against company assets to fund his lifestyle. But we fixed it. Every employee pension that Marcus had borrowed from was repaid in full with interest. Every vendor he'd cheated was made whole. Every contract was reviewed and either honored or legally dissolved. The colonel came by personally to oversee the return of the encryption keys and classified technology. We spent 3 days going through every system, every chip, every piece of software. You did good work, Agent Miller, he said when we finished. I'm proud of you. Thank you, sir. It needed to be done. He paused at the door. Are you sure you don't want to come back? We could use someone with your skills. I smiled. I'm 72 years old, Colonel. I'm right where I belong. He saluted. I saluted back. After he left, I stood in the empty server room and felt something close to peace. 6 months after Marcus's arrest, I walked into the boardroom one last time. The company was stable now, profitable, clean. The new board was excellent. The employees trusted me again. I'd accomplished what I needed to accomplish. I sat down in the CEO chair and looked at the camera I'd had installed specifically for this moment. I was going to record a message for the company, something they could watch and remember. My name is Catherine Miller, I said to the camera. I'm 72 years old. For the past 43 years, I've worked in this industry that often forgets women exist, especially older women. I've been dismissed, underestimated, and pushed aside more times than I can count. I paused, gathering my thoughts. But here's what I've learned. Being underestimated is a weapon. When people think you're too old, too confused, too weak to matter, they get careless. They make mistakes. They show you exactly who they are. I leaned forward. My brother thought he could erase me. He thought being louder, more aggressive, and more confident meant he was smarter. But volume isn't intelligence. Confidence isn't competence. And cruelty isn't strength. I smiled. Never underestimate a woman who has spent her life listening while you spent yours talking. We hear everything. We remember everything. And when the time is right, we act. I stopped the recording and sat back. I was tired but satisfied. Justice had been served. The company was saved. And I had proven something important, not to Marcus or to anyone else, but to myself. I was still here. I was still capable. I was still dangerous when I needed to be. And I was just getting started.